Hey, podcast listeners, welcome back to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock, and we have quite a show in store for you today. Shannon Powers from the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture is here to talk about this year's hemp program in Pennsylvania. Then we hear from Chase Hubbard, who writes the Hemp Daily Bulletin for the Jacobsen. And finally, we check in with Jonathan Miller from the US Hemp Roundtable. He'll tell us about the Safe Banking Act, how it can help hemp farmers during the pandemic, and what you can do to get it passed by the Senate. We'll take a quick sponsor break, and then we'll just get into the show. This episode is brought to you by King's Agri-Seeds, your source for premium forage, cover crop, and now industrial hemp seeds. King's hemp lineup now includes both autoflower and photoperiod CBD varieties, as well as fiber and grain varieties too, all from industry leaders. So whatever hemp you're planning to grow this year, King's Agri-Seeds has got you covered. Call 717-687-6224 or visit kingsagriseeds.com/hemp for more information. Shannon Powers, welcome back to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Great to be with you.
Yeah, so these are strange times here in the state and the country with the coronavirus pandemic and the shutdown. How is the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture handling this? Like, how are you getting all of the important work done that needs to be done and still maintaining all of the restrictions?
Well, I can't see my colleagues, but I know that they're working, making progress. We spend a lot of time on meetings like the one that we're having now via Zoom. There was a mad scramble initially, but fortunately they had laid good groundwork. And as you know, with hemp, everything was new. So Sarah Pickle, Ruth Welliver, the gang of folks who are working so hard to build a hemp program, they were used to building something new.
Right.
So they're really not thrown by radical changes.
How is it affecting the hemp program? Like I imagine before you would get lots of people to the office to ask questions and, how is it affecting things?
Yeah, I don't know that we had that many walk-in questions before. Initially, there were some changes. Initially the folks processing hemp applications were facing some of the same challenges that we all were, with tremendous demands on internet access. So your processes were slower as you were remoting into folders, those kinds of challenges. But also, like initially, there was a delay when the department did not receive mail. So, and as you know, there were elements of the application that had to be mailed in.
Right.
So that created a delay. There were some other issues that had to be dealt with. For example, the FBI background check, the locations where you can't do a fingerprint check remotely. So, and the locations were closed. So we had to build into the process more time for people to be able to get their background checks completed. There were some other challenges, like some of the documentation that folks needed for their field access documents, the agreements that had to be signed, the proof that you have to provide that you do in fact have the right to plant a field. Right. Some of that took longer because physical locations were closed. So that did create some delays for folks on the other end. We've allowed for those delays in the process.
Right. So the initial deadline for a grower permit was April 1st. Has everyone received their permits yet? If they've passed everything? Their
permits are still being processed, actually.
Okay.
We initially received about 630 applications, but many of them were incomplete. And as you know, too, the processors, this year processors need to get a permit, and about 10% of the applications were for processors, and they don't have a deadline.
Right.
As of May 14th, so what was that, last Friday? 415 applications had been completely approved, and they're being mailed out as they're approved.
And that is slightly higher than last year, right?
Right. We issued 324 growing permits last year.
Okay.
So we've received a higher volume. And we've approved so far quite a bit higher number. And, we still have ways to go.
So why do you think there are more? Just a greater interest, or do you think the lower permit cost brought people in?
A little of both. I think, people had needed time to do their homework and find out that they would have a market for what they were growing. And that's something that we certainly encouraged.
Yeah.
I think maybe in past years, people didn't have time to do that research and really make an informed investment in what they wanted to do.
Are you seeing a lot of repeat growers, or is it new people?
We are. I don't have a number on return permits, but yeah, I think that for the most part, my understanding is growers have been enthusiastic. Sure, they have faced some challenges, but we've had very few who just packed it in after one season. Most growers returned last year from the previous season, and we've just added more.
What were some of the challenges from last year that you think this year you're just on top of and not a problem anymore?
In previous season, we didn't have time to map and get really robust data online that would help people see where other growers were located, and see, and we didn't know where processors would be, since there was no requirement for processors to register. We knew anecdotally where they were, and we knew where people were that had a relationship with the department or per the steering committee, but we didn't have a really robust set of data that people could look at online to help them make their decisions as to whether they wanted to grow. This year we have that. You won't see 2020 data. I don't think it's live quite yet, but the 2019 data is there, and you can see everyone who's growing, where they're located. You can see once the processors get on there, you'll be able to distinguish where there are processors. So you'll have a lot more data to make your decisions with.
Okay.
And also there is a link to where the medical marijuana locations are. And, since you can't grow within a perimeter around the medical marijuana locations, that it helps to have that. You don't have to make a phone call or go to the website to find that the information is all in one place.
And that's a 3-mile perimeter, right?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen the interactive map on the site. I'll put a link to that on our show page for this too. But yeah, that's very, very helpful for growers. Yeah,
it is currently 2019's map. The data was being reviewed but hasn't gone live yet for 2020.
Do you have a sense of when that will go live?
It could be there this morning. I haven't checked again this morning, but they're working on it. Just you have to review everything before you make it go live. Make sure that there are no errors.
Okay, but it's happening soon.
It is absolutely happening soon.
Great. Do you get a sense of the division between fiber and grain and CBD? I know last year most everybody was growing for CBD. Has that changed this year?
I don't have those numbers yet. That's one of the things, having Sarah and the small team of people who are processing the applications, having them stop to do that kind of calculation. We just haven't been able to pause and figure that out. So we don't have it would be a guess. Okay. We have encouraged fiber and seed because there are fewer regulatory questions on the federal side with fiber and seed, and fewer challenges with, some of the uncertainty with the interim rule and how that's going to play out. That factors in less certainly with fiber than it does with CBD.
Yeah, I imagine your department was relieved when USDA sort of walked back a couple of their rules for this year, with the DEA license testing and the destruction methods.
We were. That's basically just a delay. They didn't walk it back altogether, but that was something we had requested in our comments to USDA at the end of January.
Yeah, it'd be such a huge burden on your department, on government in general.
Right, and so one of the biggest challenges in prior years was basically communication among the federal entities. Mm-hmm. And so working out that challenge, they've just done a tremendous amount of working with, the DEA, state law enforcement, federal law enforcement, to have them communicate fully and fully understand what it meant to have a regulated hemp program.
It's my understanding that hemp is still on the state list of controlled substances. Is your department actively lobbying for a change to that? I know there's a Senate Bill 936 that wants to remove hemp from the controlled substance list in the state. Where are you guys on that?
So we're the department is monitoring that bill. As you know, on the federal level, the 2018 Farm Bill removed hemp from the federal controlled substance list.
But not from the state list. It's still technically a controlled substance in the state.
Right.
Yeah, that could be a problem.
And there's disagreement as to whether it's necessary.
Yeah. You mentioned the steering committee. I have some interviews scheduled with some folks on the steering committee in a couple of weeks, but can you talk briefly about the changes from last year's steering committee to this year's?
Absolutely. The steering committee has been really a priceless entity. They're not they weren't created by statute, so they are really an advisory committee. Mm-hmm. But they're made up of industry, they're driven by industry, and they exist for the industry. We're building a hemp industry from the ground up. And so it was really important to get all those perspectives in there, whether it was, the financial entities, the insurers, the growers, the processors. We needed all of those voices at the table. And that committee has been a work in progress. And this year we have sort of refined the structure a little bit. We've made a leadership team. There are 8 folks on the leadership team. Dr. Ron Kander of Jefferson University, one of the researchers who's been involved from the very beginning. He's heading that leadership team, and they will meet at the end of the month to determine how the committee will operate, to refine their priorities and their mission, and to set a schedule for the full committee. And those full committee meetings will be public.
Are there still the common questions that your department gets about hemp, and that maybe we could address them here and maybe cut down on some of your phone calls to your office?
Ooh, that is a great question. There are, we have an FAQ online, so I would encourage your listeners to look at the website, look at the FAQ. Your questions may be answered readily in looking at the website. Mm-hmm. A big question last year was always, where are the processors? Who, if I grow hemp, who's going to be my market? Right. And that is considerably easier to answer this year, with the processors online. Plus, some of the processors now have a little better sense of what their needs are, what their challenges are with federal regulatory structure. There were a lot of questions about that last year. This year, I don't have as good a sense of what those frequently asked questions are, but they've largely been related to the challenges of getting, paperwork in place of, will I, in comparison to other states, are other states growers, if they process their hemp in Pennsylvania, are they going to shut me out of the market because they don't have to face the same rules? Those kinds of questions.
Right.
One of the things I would point out as far as that goes is, so the USDA pushed off their enforcement until October, but they just pushed it off. Pennsylvania went ahead and kept the rules, the proposed USDA rules in place so as not to disadvantage our growers in terms of funding. So they are eligible for, if they are following the Pennsylvania's plan and Pennsylvania's regulatory structure, which they have to grow hemp in Pennsylvania, they're eligible for USDA rural development and NRCS grants, whereas folks from other states that aren't following the interim rule, the original, or the rule that was announced late last year, those folks would be ineligible for that funding.
Okay. And there's like 20 states that have decided to stay with the 2014 Farm Bill rules.
Right.
This year, yeah.
Right. So if you grow in one of those states and you want to have your hemp processed in Pennsylvania, you do have to follow Pennsylvania's rules. Okay.
All right. Yeah, because it seems like that those states might be at a greater advantage. I guess as far as the compliance, the THC levels, they sort of have a little more leeway in the old rules. And I'd wonder if that would put our farmers at a disadvantage.
That's
in the
possible, but
marketplace.
what that means to some extent is that they're going to be changing rules midstream when they're harvesting. So that's not necessarily an advantage.
Right. Do you anticipate the USDA backing off that 15-day harvest rule?
We certainly requested that they back off the 15-day rule.
Will they listen? That's the question.
I don't have a crystal ball, but we did make some, really specific requests, and there were requests based on some of our top requests were really based on what folks in the industry saw as disadvantages or as unrealistic expectations.
Yeah, I don't know where that 15-day rule came from. Like, I haven't heard anybody saying, yes, 15 days, that's the way to do it. Everybody wants it 30 days or 45 days. So,
yeah, I think our request was 45 days.
Mm-hmm.
We just really felt like 15 days was completely unrealistic.
There were lots of good recommendations in that letter that PDA sent to USDA.
Yeah, reading it all lined out in the letter to the USDA really, it lays out the issues very clearly. Here's how this works in reality.
Mm-hmm.
And to some extent, we had very little time. We were already in the midst of creating our program and our permit application for this year when they put out the interim rule. And I can't remember how many pages it was, but the thing was, massive. Right. And so we had to pause, figure out what we were going to do. And we did have, there was a lot of communication among states trying to figure out, how this was going to be interpreted. And it was a mad scramble, which I'm sure you remember in the waning hours of 2019. And we didn't want to take so much time in interpreting it that we delayed the season and made it and put farmers at a huge disadvantage.
Right.
So we went ahead and, forged ahead, carefully crafting a regulatory program that met what our perception of the federal requirements were. We did that. We are acting in good faith. And we think that we have built a program that meets the federal requirements and will provide a sustainable, robust hemp industry, that provides opportunity for years to come in Pennsylvania.
So when do you think all of the permits will be out? Because I know there's farmers who, if they haven't received their permits yet, they're not able to buy seed, and that sort of delays their season.
Ooh, I'm so glad you asked that question. Actually, we did create sort of an interim step where we're issuing a permit number and an expected permit date to applicants so that they're not delayed in getting their seeds or their clones, or they need to get their plant materials, and some of the suppliers are requiring that information. So we created a step that won't hinder folks getting their seed in the ground.
Oh, good. Anything else you want to tell our listeners about the hemp program?
I mean, one thing that COVID-19 has really brought to the forefront is the advantage of having a short supply chain. If you don't have to ship what you grow out of state, right. If your buyer is close by. And we really think that we've built, or we are in the process of building, a program that keeps the opportunity here and gives as much opportunity as possible within a short supply chain. We're working to build those opportunities. There's tremendous excitement about the industry. I think you were at the Hemp Summit last year. Tremendous excitement about the opportunity that hemp presents if we build a careful, thoughtful regulatory program. I think there's tremendous evidence that we're getting there.
Shannon Powers, Press Secretary at the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thanks for having me here. It's always great to talk to you.
So you just heard Shannon mention the Pennsylvania Hemp Summit that took place in Lancaster, Pennsylvania back in October 2019. This year's summit is scheduled for December 8th and 9th, and the organizers of the summit are looking for your feedback. There's a short survey at bit.ly/hempdaily Hemp Summit Survey. That's bit.ly/Hemp Summit Survey. I'll have that link on lancasterfarming.com too. So if you went last year or plan to go this year or on the fence about going because of the current worldwide pandemic, please take the survey. They want to hear from you so that they can make this year's summit even better than last year. Okay, my next guest is Chase Hubbard. He's a senior analyst at the Jacobsen, which you may or may not be familiar with, but they do market reporting for a wide range of agriculture commodities, including hemp. Chase Hubbard, welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. Could you introduce yourself for us, please?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, my name is Chase Hubbard. I'm an analyst with the Jacobsen. We do price reporting for agricultural commodities.
Okay, can you develop that idea of what the Jacobsen is? I know you've been around a long time, so this is a sort of a historic, well-respected market reporting company. Can you give us a sense of that history?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, it is a over 150-year-old company that started in the tallow markets in Chicago, and now we report on a series of agricultural commodities, niche agricultural commodities that are typically less than $5 billion per year. And we started reporting on hemp back in July. But as an independent price reporting agency, what we do is we report pricing for a series of these markets, and we have no financial interest in those markets. We don't trade in any of the commodities that we report on. But our primary function is price reporting. We also do market intelligence reports, which are forward-looking, data-driven market outlooks, forecasts for the various commodities. So that's pretty much it. And then we also do some consulting, but price reporting and forecasting is our bread and butter.
And you yourself are responsible for the Hemp Daily Bulletin. How did you get interested in hemp to the point where you are able to put these bulletins together?
Yeah, great question. So I've been in agriculture for my entire professional life, and have always been aware of hemp. And through some mutual connections, this opportunity came up, and this was something very, very interesting, and utilized my skill set in research and developing programs. And so I started as a consultant to explore the possibility of starting the Hemp Bulletin, and then after an analysis, we decided it was needed for market transparency, and we started reporting back in July. So really, my background in agriculture, I have a pretty broad background in agriculture, both in farm management. So I can adjust planters and farm machinery and et cetera, nuts and bolts, but right. I've also traveled and led people to various countries, and spent time in consulting in Cuba and Vietnam, et cetera. So not only that, but time working in other agricultural markets, everywhere from California Central Valley to even visited up in your area once in Pennsylvania. So I guess what I'm saying is that I have a pretty broad background in agriculture, and that's I think what they really wanted to bring to this bulletin is an understanding of the commodity starting in the field.
And these reports are incredibly detailed. You provide a daily prices for things like biomass, organic biomass, crude extract, distillates, isolates, all the way down to grain and fiber prices. So where do these numbers come from?
Yeah, so those are the numbers that are reported by various people that participate in the wholesale market. So typically farmers, extractors, traders, anyone that is involved in transactions, large companies, small companies. It's an extremely diverse marketplace.
So you're talking to different people in the industry, all day long?
Correct.
Okay. And then is there like a certain time of the day where like, all right, this is the number for the day and this is what I'm going to publish?
Well, the numbers don't change that much in hemp as of yet. it's a very immature market,
Mm-hmm.
and very diverse, like I said, with people operating at a variety of levels. So yeah, absolutely. The cutoff in the afternoon is 4:45. So anything that gets reported after that goes on, gets incorporated into the next day's reporting.
Okay. And the commentary that you provide before you get to the prices is fantastic and detailed, and it's always something new and interesting. How do you decide what to write about in the commentary?
Well, that's a great question, a question that I ask myself every morning. So it is daily commentary. In most of our commodities, it's daily data-driven commentary, since we like that kind of data in hemp. I tend to focus on issues that affect markets and pricing. And so, those are the kind of things that our readers are interested in. And I certainly use reader feedback to guide my commentary. But the commentary is meant to be a conversation that allows people who are thinking about these things in their own business another voice to add to the conversation to help prompt thoughts, et cetera. So
Right.
it's not necessarily reporting. It's really meant as, again, commentary to help people in their planning processes, et cetera.
Right. So who is your intended audience?
Pretty diverse as well. So everybody that works in the hemp industry, from growers to extractors to ancillary industries. So a variety of people in agriculture, university folks and extension, certainly ag economists, the financial services sector, and attorneys, accounting. So it's pretty
Right,
diverse.
everybody.
It's a yeah.
Okay. So it's a subscription-based service, right? So people have to sign up and pay a monthly or yearly fee. Does that give them access to all of the reporting, or do you have to choose sort of one commodity?
Right. So if you purchase a tier 1 subscription from us, then you get access to 2 verticals, so 2 commodities.
Mm-hmm.
And when we started, we did run some specials where we offered access just to the Hemp Bulletin at a reduced price, and we may continue to offer some of that as well. But in general, our tier 1 includes 2 commodities.
Okay. All right. So obviously, you're following the hemp industry very, very closely. What are some of your top concerns about the industry? Like, where are maybe the weak points that need to be developed to make this industry stronger?
Well, so Eric, it is really super immature. So there's a lot of pieces to the supply chain, value chain. Everything that makes markets move is fairly underdeveloped in the hemp sector. The policy issues are probably the biggest concern, I think, for market movement. The FDA's position on CBD, and all of these things that leave some remnant issues to iron out in terms of banking and insurance. The industry is not entirely normalized yet, so that needs to continue to happen. And producers and extractors need to have access to basic banking services and merchant services, and so that's a big issue right there. But I could go on and on and on about the issues, but it's only really because it's an emerging industry, and there's just a really big to-do list for developing markets.
That's what fascinates me about this, is sort of watching, the industries develop right before our eyes. Can you think of any other industry that came out like this and has developed like this?
Yeah, it's true that there really is no precedent, particularly coming from agriculture, not in our lifetime. The tech industry certainly was a pretty charged business, but it was more universal in the way that in its impacts. So that was broader, but there are similar traits, and people were running around with their hair on fire last year in the hemp industry, and things have started to settle down a little bit. But we tracked the biodiesel markets, and we were part of that industry, emerging and reporting on that industry. But so there's some similarities there as well, but nothing like hemp. It also is fairly universal in the way that it reaches such a variety of people. politics and business. It is extremely diverse.
Mm-hmm. So what in the hemp space most excites you? Like where do you think the energy is going?
Well, obviously, cannabinoids have been the big driver to date, but both hemp seed and fiber are of real interest to me, and the Jacobsen fiber in particular. It has such broad applications throughout industry that the volume of hemp that'll be produced for fiber applications will eclipse what we see for cannabinoids. And also on the hemp seed side too, it's another crop for producers to add to their rotations.
Yep.
Has benefits for rotations, and as demand grows in hemp seed, particularly as we develop what's called the hemp seed complex, like in soybeans, we have the soybean complex that involves soybean meal and then soy hulls and soybeans, a broad variety of things,
Sure.
oil, et cetera. The same thing is happening with hemp seed, and what that means for livestock producers and also industry. Hemp seed oil has a lot of applications. So I think both of those things are really very exciting. The cannabinoid segment is also interesting, but the other two really have such enormous impacts that
Right.
we're watching those very, very closely as they develop.
And there still needs to be some legislative changes before livestock can be fed hemp, right?
Yeah, it needs approval. And that approval through FDA is going to require a fair amount of research. And one of the things I recently wrote about too is the need for research and collaboration in research. So the best way for that to happen is for someone in industry that has a product in mind to take that through the approval process, but also advocates like the Hemp Feed Coalition. There are people involved and research institutions that are starting to run the appropriate trials for feeding hemp seed or hemp seed meal,
Right.
like the lambs at Colorado State. So a bunch of research needs to happen, and the appropriate approval process through the FDA. One of the things I wrote about though this past week was that states may be able to chart their own course with hemp feed approvals as well, in the same way that states like Virginia have enacted legislation for CBD that isn't consistent with the FDA.
Right.
I think this is also a possibility for states if they see an opportunity for their state agriculture, and they've done enough research to feel confident about the safety in whatever species. That's certainly one possibility.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting states' rights things happening around hemp. I find it pretty fascinating that some states have adopted the new interim rule while the other states are staying on the 2014 rules. I don't know, it just kind of cracks me up, and I'm just waiting to see what's going to happen.
It is really interesting, the different approaches by various states. I think last year you saw states sort of in a competition to put as much acreage on the board as possible,
Mm-hmm.
and I think some were pretty strong advocates and encouraging hemp producers. In retrospect, I think that probably some more caution, but anyway. It is interesting. It creates a real patchwork of legislation around the country, and not just states and federal, but also towns and cities. We see that in California in particular with the moratoriums. Really impacts hemp in California.
Right. Do you talk to any of the tribes in the U.S. that are growing hemp? I've seen a lot of different tribes getting their USDA approval.
We haven't worked with the tribes. We don't really work with the State Department of Agriculture that much either, only insofar as utilizing data that they present and occasionally other contact. That's increasing, and we do have connections. We have readers there, commissioners of agriculture and agriculture departments. So, I expect that as that activity picks up and tribes start to produce more, we'll certainly be paying attention to that. We pretty much watch. We go to where the volume is
Right.
in production, and that's where we really focus our time.
Okay. Do you think there will be less CBD acreage this year?
Yeah, so we've recently done a producer survey and combined with our balance sheets and commodities, supply and demand balance sheets. So we factor in a wide range of data in that to come up with our numbers. And we see similar acreage to last year.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly states like Oregon, key producing states are have much less acreage currently. But a lot of the producers that are left are ones that are much more likely to get that material out of the field too this year. Some of the bottlenecks have been ironed out. People are doing it again, sometimes, doing it for the third, fourth, fifth time. So there's a series of dynamics in there at play that'll affect the total yield and the total, inventory of, say, biomass at the end of the season. But we're looking at similar acreage, and same with fiber and hemp. There's really not much more fiber being grown this year, but certainly people are experimenting on smaller parcels. And as a farmer myself, that's certainly what I would do is to plant a small plot and use my equipment line to harvest it and find the weak points so that I will, that I could be ready if the markets present themselves. But so similar picture this year, certainly 10 to 15% of that is going to be in CBG. Really not enough volume in the other minor cannabinoids for us to report on, and also not in CBG currently. But that's sort of the general picture that we see for 2020.
Okay. So you're in North Carolina?
I am, Asheville, North Carolina.
Okay. And you're not a hemp farmer?
I'm not.
Okay. What would it take for you to start growing hemp?
I guess I would have to stop reporting on hemp markets for starters. And I have a lot of friends that are hemp producers, and of course made many more in this function. That's a great question, Eric. I think that it's definitely a possibility in the future, but not anytime soon.
All right. Is there anything else our listeners should know, either about the Jacobsen or the Hemp Daily Bulletin that you publish?
Well, we do a trial, and if you're a producer and or you work in hemp markets and you trade in hemp derivatives, extracts, etc., please get in touch with me. We'd love to get your input, and happy in exchange to provide some bulletin access. I think that the main thing to keep in is that the industry is still very opaque. Traders are really using it as an opportunity for arbitrage to buy material in one area and sell it in another. For people that just aren't as aware of markets or have a command on the bigger picture, whether it be domestic or global, because export markets are one of the opportunities. So I just encourage people to make sure they get good, objective information for business plans or any kind of planning, market planning, and the Jacobsen can certainly fill that role if people need that.
All right, and they can find that at thejacobsen.com, and I'll put a link to that on the show page for this episode.
Great. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah. All right, Chase Hubbard, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So I can't recommend the Hemp Daily Bulletin from the Jacobsen enough. Excellent hemp commentary along with detailed price reporting delivered to your email inbox 5 days a week. So I'm sure we will be checking back in with Chase periodically. Okay, moving on. Next, we're going to hear about the Safe Banking Act that stands for Secure and Fair Enforcement. Jonathan Miller joins us from the US Hemp Roundtable. Jonathan Miller, welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. Could you introduce yourself for us, please?
Sure. I'm Jonathan Miller. I'm the general counsel for the US Hemp Roundtable. I'm also the member in charge of Frost Brown Todd in Lexington, Kentucky.
And can you give us just a brief overview of what the US Roundtable is?
The US Hemp Roundtable is the industry's leading business advocacy organization. We have 90 members, or over 90 members, that range from every element of the hemp food chain, from seed in the ground to sale of final products. Our mission is to promote the sale and growth of safe and legal hemp and hemp products. And we've been working for the past several years to promote legalization in Washington, D.C. and in dozens of states across the country.
And so today we're talking about the Safe Banking Act. Can you tell us what that is? It's an acronym, SAFE. Can you explain what that is and then how it relates to sort of what's happening in the world today with the coronavirus?
Sure. So the Safe Banking Act was introduced a few years ago. It was initially focused on marijuana banking. As your listeners likely know, in dozens of states, marijuana is legal, but on the federal level, it is illegal. And since so many banks and other merchant services institutions are regulated federally, they were either uncomfortable or legally prohibited from engaging in banking and financial transaction commerces with the industry. Mm-hmm. Hemp industry is different in that hemp is legal federally, and so the same issues should not be at play. However, there are hundreds of instances, maybe thousands of hemp companies and CBD companies struggling with banking and credit card and other merchant service relationships. Yeah. So the Safe Banking Act was amended to provide an even safer harbor for hemp companies to engage in banking and merchant services.
And so the language of the Safe Banking Act has been included in a new House bill, the CARES 2 bill?
Right. So the House just passed last week what they're calling the HEROES Act, which is a new COVID-19 relief bill. It is a multi-trillion-dollar bill with dozens, if not hundreds, of provisions. But one of the provisions that we're most excited about is the inclusion of the Safe Banking Act, which is included in whole as part of this HEROES Act bill.
And so how will this directly benefit hemp farmers and other folks in the hemp industry?
Well, if it passes, it would provide enormous relief to those hemp and CBD companies that are struggling right now to find banking relationships and credit cards and other merchant services. So right now there are many banks, credit card companies across the country who are very nervous about engaging in commerce with hemp companies, in particular with CBD companies. This would eliminate their risk of getting any financial auditing or other penalties, and it would unleash incredible commerce. And so, unlike much of the HEROES Act, which has a hefty price tag, this provision would not cost taxpayers a dime, and yet it would unleash tremendous financial advantage for the industry and for the economy in general.
Right. Is there anything that hemp farmers or folks in the industry can do to help this along? Is there a call to action?
Absolutely. So it's passed the House, but it's over in the Senate. Right now, the Senate has expressed its objection to the HEROES Act in general. A few senators have criticized the inclusion of the Safe Banking Act, particularly the marijuana provisions of it, arguing that this should be COVID relief. It should not be relief for the marijuana industry. However, the fact that the House has made this such a priority to include it as part of its HEROES Act passage demonstrates that the provisions have legs, and whether they pass this time or in some future bill, it is very clear that the House is supportive. And what we need to do is we need to get the Senate supportive. And so what we've done at our US Hemp Roundtable website, which is hempsupporter.com, we set up a online portal that makes it easy for your listeners to email their senators and urge them to support the Safe Banking Act. So if you go to hempsupporter.com and you click on our resources button, you'll see that there is a portal where all you got to do is input your email address and your zip code, and automatically pops up two emails to your two senators, even if you don't know who they are.
Yeah.
And we encourage you, however, to personalize the email because particularly if you've had trouble with banking or credit card, let your senators understand and let them know how their constituents are being affected by this problem.
All right. I'll put a link to your website on the show page for this episode.
Great.
Can you give any other advice for struggling hemp businesses and farmers during this pandemic?
This is a challenging time, but we're very hopeful that the economy will start rebounding, and it's real important to get Congress to understand the challenges of the industry. Our other big issue, probably even bigger than the Safe Banking Act, is the fact that the FDA has not yet developed a regulatory regime for CBD. That has led to a chill in commerce, and that's hurt farmers across the country who are growing hemp for CBD. And so the other thing you can do on our website is to urge the Congress to pass legislation to force the FDA to finally regulate CBD, because that would have a dramatic economic impact without costing taxpayers a dime.
Jonathan Miller, I appreciate your time today. Thank you for sharing your information.
All right. Thanks for getting the word out.
Okay, so there's a lot to check out on the show page for this episode at lancasterfarming.com. Please go there and click on the links. But that pretty much does it for today's show. This is episode 86. Can you believe we've been doing this for 86 episodes? I am very grateful that I get to do this work and that I get to talk to knowledgeable people in the hemp space. Which reminds me, if you want to get in touch with me, you can always email me, podcast@lancasterfarming.com. Or heck, if you just want to pick up the phone, you can call my office number at 717-721-4462. My name is Eric Herlock. I am the digital editor at Lancaster Farming Newspaper, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. Check us out online at lancasterfarming.com. You can become a subscriber to the paper at lancasterfarming.com/podcast deal. And of course, you can follow us on Instagram at LFPodcastHemp. All right, so that does it for me. Until next time, I'll see you in the newspaper. This episode of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2020 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show was written, recorded, edited, and produced by yours truly, Eric Herlock. The music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tinbird Shadow.
Industrial hemp.